Hello, and welcome to the Anexinet Infrastructure Modernization Podcast. Here on AIM, we invite industry professionals and subject matter experts on to discuss current trends and technology topics. Today, we'll be talking remote hosting and backup and recovery with iLand. With me are Dante Orsini, SVP of Business Development at iLand, and Dean Gagnon, Infrastructure Pre-Sales Architect here at Anexinet. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic, Chris. Thank you. How about yourself?
Can't complain.
Yep. Doing well, Chris. Thank you.
Just to get started, Dante, do you mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself, what your technology background is, how you ended up in the position that you're at, things like that?
Chris, that's a great question. So for me, I started my career in finance and found my way to technology as quickly as I could. Early in my career, I was working for a VAR that was actually looking to deliver a software practice. And I was, brought in to build that practice, and it was, delivering Lawson software back in the ERP heydays of the mid 90s, and then got into more business to business type software sales, and eventually found my way to iLand, where I've been for over a decade now.
Great. And that's a heck of a run with a single company. What was it way back when that really made iLand appeal to you?
Yeah, it was interesting because I got involved with iLand when the company was really in a transition. The company's been around for 25 years now, but when I walked through the door, they were really getting out of the co-location industry. I mean, the early parts of the company were focusing on web hosting and providing co-location services across North America and Europe. So when I got here, iLand had presence at about 50 data centers. And the industry was changing, and they obviously wanted to provide more value. Virtualization was just starting to enter the market, and they chose to really focus on how can we, drive a platform, right, and really, drive more value to our customers versus just space, power, and cooling. And ultimately chose to partner with VMware and build out an enterprise infrastructure platform. And this is before everybody was saying cloud, right? You hear cloud everywhere, but I think we originally called this enterprise, VMware hosting. And the whole goal was to, work with customers that were, trying to virtualize their own infrastructure and for whatever reason, may need excess capacity. And I think a couple interesting things happened early on. One, if you all remember the days of 2008, it feels like we're kind of going through a similar economic challenge right now with coronavirus. But back in 2008, it was tough, right? I mean, you had a global financial challenge. You had a lot of organizations that were starting to virtualize their infrastructure, and they've just completely lost capital budgets. So working with partners like yourselves who also had great relationships with VMware, we would get calls all the time saying, hey, we're working with XYZ company. They've got this for backup, this for storage. This is what the network looks like. But, by the way, we're midway through a project and we're out of budget. What can you do to protect, this customer? So that really kind of launched us headlong into, driving disaster recovery solutions. And, but meanwhile, the whole goal of the company was to host business critical production applications. So we knew as part of the stack that we were delivering to the market, we had to be able to provide DR for our production customers ourselves. But inheriting a scenario from an end user, right? Their data center and all the challenges they have and having to get very focused on how do we become the production site for them in the time of disaster became a quick focus. And that's, I think, what the industry knows us best for. Quick, shout out here to the folks at Gartner. That's one area where Gartner really put iLand on the map. They covered the DR as a service space for the last 5 or 6 years. In the last 4 years straight, we've been the leader in delivering disaster recovery as a service. So that's what most people know us for. But the irony to that is the lion's share of our revenue still comes from hosting production applications.
Well, that's often how these sort of things go, right? You have a large install base that is stable and people are happy with the product. And why make too many changes?
Yeah. That's exactly it. Yep. And I think if you look at the change is the only constant in our space, right? So, if you go back 12 years, to host someone's VMware workloads, it looks completely different than it looks today. I mean, back then, every single thing we did had to be managed, right? So we'd work with a customer, understand the requirements, we'd run away, deploy everything, and then we'd hand them back limited access, via the VI client, right? So they could stop and start machines, they could mount ISOs, but that was about it, right? If they wanted to deploy a new virtual machine or add capacity to an existing machine, grow their storage pools, it was a ticket to support, and our team would handle it. And after a couple of years of doing that, we started to really get closer to VMware, and they were now starting to focus on trying to drive more of a cloud solution to market. And this started off with some technology that's called Vcloud Director. Dean, I'm sure you've been familiar with this. And
yes, absolutely.
Okay, when VMware first released this, the reaction we saw from customers was pretty interesting because the interface looked really close to Lab Manager. I don't know if you remember Lab Manager, but that's what VCD looked like. And the VMware was touting this as going to be the end all be all enterprise cloud platform, right? And they were pushing it to the enterprise marketplace. But then they also had this community of people like iLand that were hosting providers. And hindsight's 2020, but we were the only ones that really adopted it, the hosting community, because the enterprise looked at it and said, well, geez, guys, why would I use this when it's really just abstracting what I see today, right, with Virtual Center? So it was interesting that it kind of fell flat on the enterprise, but for people like us, it was great because now we could provide our customers with a lot more control, where they could actually go deploy things and scale things and have, complete control over the infrastructure. Now, it wasn't without its faults. I mean, the platform was missing some critical components if you're going to really look to host production applications. And that's where people like us saw an opportunity, right? And that's where we started to develop our own platform. And we started to fill the holes that we saw. And that first one is, we've already kind of discussed it, is, for better, for worse, if I'm running my own data center, I've got visibility into everything. But if I move to a cloud provider, a lot of that's abstracted. So we really wanted to focus on how can we deliver complete transparency to our users, right? And what I mean by that is show me everything associated with performance on the infrastructure, right? Don't just tell me if it's up or down, right? I want to see, what if I want to see latency on disk or the network? So our goal was to lead the industry in transparency. Now, keep in mind, this is going back to like 2009, 2010 timeframe, right, where we started to develop this. And then also, again, focusing on the production workload, we need to make sure we could have a backup service. So we took things like Veeam and we integrated that into the platform. We knew that we had to provide DR. So again, we integrated Veeam, we integrated technologies like Zerto. And then, of course, working with a lot of folks that are in regulated industries, right? Cloud's not secure. That was the big thing you heard 5 years ago. So you might imagine that, folks like us really hyper-focused on that. What can we do to provide the right levels of, access management, right? And to be able to really get complex with large global organizations. They could have various different roles. And, what can we do on the network side from a security perspective? What tooling can we integrate? So we started to integrate things like Trend Micro's Deep Security Suite or Tenable Nessus for vulnerability scanning. And we just kept listening, right? Kept listening to our customers, kept listening to our partners. And, compliance became another big one. Obviously, that runs hand in hand with security, but I felt like early in the industry for hosting, especially when you're working with let's say a global enterprise and you're working with a division that's trying to take a new solution to market, right? There's a high probability they developed this internally, but when it came time to really scale it and take it out, usually that's too much of a burden on the internal IT team, and they tend to work with hosting providers to do that. So really trying to focus on the compliance side and make sure that not only could we follow process and controls from a security perspective, but that we could prove it through auditing, allowed us to really help bolster those organizations that were trying to take services to specific markets, whether it be finance, pharma, right, healthcare, or just in general. There's a lot of different things to consider when you're looking at who you're selling to, right? If it's a city or state, local government, if it's a regional concern, whether you're doing business in North America, EMEA, APAC, everybody's got their latest version of data protection laws, right? So it can get kind of confusing for our customers. So that's why we take our folks on the compliance side and we take all those audit reports and we inject them directly into the platform, but we don't stop there. We continue to work with the clients and we'll bring our compliance team to the table if they need help, getting through certain audits. So it's been a lot of fun. And so far, the markets have responded, very, very favorably, I would say, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the platform and drive more value to the customer.
So, okay, bringing us up to the current day, what are you seeing in terms of infrastructure as far as people? Do they do a split workload? Are they looking more to do exclusively cloud or exclusively on-prem with the cloud as the backup? Is there a merger between the two? What does the market look like?
All of the above, Chris. I mean, we joke about this internally, right? You can't see me right now, but I'm basically pivoting my arm, right? Kind of like showing you a needle. We call it the cloudometer because we have the same conversation, right? So we're trying to understand where an organization sits on that timeline, if you will. Are they using the cloud for storage? Are they using it for backup? Are they using it for dev test, for production? Are they looking at hybrid cloud solutions where they've got, like you said, infrastructure locally, but they want to make sure that they can, have a cloud platform to be able to use for, whatever the use case may be. And at the same time, our people, you hear about people talking about cloud first, right? We're kind of coining a new term, cloud now, because what we've seen is if you just, again, I'm kind of a bit of a history lesson. Tell me what you guys think here, but if you go back 10, 15 years, virtualization really changed the data center, right? So you saw this massive adoption and human nature, right? It became easy to deploy things. So what do? We deploy a hell of a lot of things. Next thing you know, we've got a management challenge, right? Take that, combine it with just the speed and breakneck pace of the markets, right? Everybody trying to compete. There's so much pressure on IT to not just keep the lights on and do more with less, but to also innovate, right, and become more strategic to the business. And so you saw folks that were building and scaling data centers no longer able to keep up with those lines of businesses. So what happened was folks started to go outside, as we all know, shadow IT and start to leverage various different public clouds. And some of the challenges that created for folks is pretty crazy. So again, from our perspective, because we are running a VMware-based infrastructure, we're able to really, really streamline that process. Meaning, you've got investments in teams that know VMware locally, typically, right? The average customer is still using VMware in their own data center if they're still managing a data center. So while there's all sorts of hype around public cloud, at the end of the day, not every application is a great candidate to be re-platformed to a whole nother platform, right? That you have to teach everybody how to use, where the network constructs are different, the way you deploy applications is different, the way you scale is different, right? And the list goes on and on and on. So point being is making that as native as possible allows you to really leverage the existing investments that you have as far as headcount's concerned. So you're not changing those skill sets. And at the same time, I believe gives you a much more pragmatic approach, meaning if you built your data center, you didn't just build it all in one day and leave it, right? People are always adding capacity. So that means that, capacity is always aging at some rate, right? So maybe you're not going to forklift your entire data center overnight, right? Doesn't sound too probable. But if you've got a portion of your capacity that you realize is hitting that end of life mark, it's a great opportunity to dip your toe into the water and figure out, okay, well, can I actually deploy these applications on a very similar technology stack, but start to get myself out of the data center business, meaning I don't no longer have to worry about the hardware that it's running on, right? Or even the hypervisor. Now I can start to focus on the OS and the application layer. So that's really where we've had a lot of success. But I think more so than that, if you think about disaster recovery, is another great opportunity of someone dipping their toe in the water, meaning if they have multiple data centers and they're doing disaster recovery themselves internally, chances are they're not happy with the results that they're getting. We see a lot of folks struggle with this. Again, pretty obvious, right? Because all the other things are taking precedent to grow the business and remain competitive. So people have less and less time for risk mitigation. So what you see is, they may not have up-to-date plans. They may be running on aged hardware in that secondary site. So we've seen a lot of CIOs think very quickly, okay, if I can get some of these applications out of the data center, i.e. migrate to SaaS where I can, where it makes sense for the business, that's going to reduce some of the constraints I've got internally. Now, do I still want to be in the business of managing multiple data centers, right? So usually there's a pivot point there when they've reached enough pain internally, or they've realized that that the equipment and maybe the facilities that they're using for their secondary site is due for a refresh. And that becomes that pivot point of, okay, can we really look at continuing to invest in this, or should we start to look at ways that we can get this out of here and leverage cloud, right? So for us, we're seeing all that, all the way down to someone saying, okay, I'm not quite there yet. I'm still very happy with my local data center. I've still got run room and time, but you know what? I do see challenges with some of my backup infrastructure, and I want to get out of this tape business. I wonder if cloud's ready for that yet, right? So we have a really strong side of our business that delivers backup as a service, where we're providing just the cloud endpoint, whether people are looking to archive data to us, or if they're looking to just really follow best practice and get a third copy of their data off-site, so they can mitigate internal and external threats, right? Think ransomware mitigation being probably the primary use case.
Right. And from our end, from the Nextnet's end, and the conversations we're having with our customers on a daily basis, those are the exact same things that we're hearing from them. It's always a situation when, companies are considering public cloud, SaaS products, whatever the case may be. It's never a cookie cutter type situation where, most of your customers coming to you with their needs. They're always different. Everybody's unique, and their challenges are vast and wide. I think, the thing that I personally love about iLand is that it makes all of that simple. Because let's be honest, nowadays, most customers, they don't want to have to be dealing with, infrastructure, configurations, doing the mundane tasks on a day-to-day basis that takes up a lot of their time. They want to be able to, help the individual lines of business and ultimately grow their company. So if you can take a major piece away, whether it be, traditional co-location, whether it be backup as a service, DR as a service, these types of projects and requirements, they take a lot of time and a lot of planning. And, Anexinet's history over the years has been exactly that, working with our customers and providing services to help them through those projects and those processes. With iLand, it's really simplifying that down, making it very, very easy for customers to, make that jump. And maybe they start small. That's one thing that we always kind of reiterate with our customers when they come to us and say, hey, we're looking at public cloud. We want to start moving. They don't really know what that means or what that entails and all the different pieces that relate to that. So we usually take it from an approach of, let's start small. Let's talk about maybe your backups. Where's your DR strategy at? Do you have a secondary location? All of those types of things. And, what we're finding a lot of the times is that, iLand's able to help us with that and really make that transition very, very easy and simple for the customer, which again, nowadays it doesn't matter what technology it is, whether it's backup, DR, the hypervisor virtualization. Everybody wants everything streamlined, easy to use, and automated. So again, with iLand, it makes that transition so easy to do. And then, going forward for them, they can start focusing on other things in the business.
Yep, exactly. It's exactly what we're seeing too, Dean. I think one of the big, things that people don't realize is they look at public cloud and they, it's obviously challenging to understand and digest, because it's a whole new platform, right? That's why I think we've had such success, because we've built our platform based on a lot of the same technologies that someone's running in their own data center. But at the same time, we've also integrated this all into a single interface. So you can manage everything globally via a single platform, which, really helps. Also, the whole thing is driven via API, right? So as people become more and more advanced, they're getting, like you said, focusing on automation and orchestration. While we've built that into the platform, people don't have to use our UI if they're that advanced, right? So we've developed several. It's first of all built on a RESTful API. It's all Swagger based, but we also support several different SDKs for folks that want to leverage the infrastructure as code, if you will. But I think the other thing that is really important is that so many folks are looking at this and trying to figure out, like, okay, well, wait a minute, if I've got this one challenge, I can't put this square peg into this round hole that is just this cloud platform, right? What do I do when I've built, all of my network infrastructure on a specific vendor, right? Part of making this seamless and easy is to help someone maximize the investments they have in the skill sets that they have locally, right? So what we try to do is change as little of that as possible, right? So great example, if you're thinking about things like DR, right? If, iLand uses, VMware's NSX technology, we're also a big Cisco shop. However, we give our customers a lot of flexibility, right? If they're going to bring direct connections into us, but they've got various different firewall technologies that maybe they've deployed, within their data center or globally, that their staff understands, well, one of the great things is being able to stand up a virtual appliance or even co-locate physical appliances, right? If somebody has the asset and they want to tie that into the infrastructure. So having that flexibility is great because, like you said, everyone's different. Everyone's got different requirements. And oftentimes what we find is you have to make those compromises if you're looking at a public cloud. It doesn't give you the flexibility to integrate certain things like that, right? So making sure that we can keep as much intact as possible with the typical operating model that the organization has, but also be able to provide them with the flexibility to scale.
And it brings up an interesting point, Dante. As they go through that transition and start leveraging products, like iLand, public cloud, what have you, do you find, customers are starting to adopt, and once they, let's say, purchase iLand service, maybe they're doing some light co-location, DR as a service. Do you find them transitioning a year, maybe 2 years down the road into, putting more production level applications in public cloud in your facilities, or is it still just kind of, no, we're staying where we're at for now? What do you see across most?
Yeah, great question. So I think it's absolutely, someone starts in one place and they end in another, right? So just as your example earlier, they may start working with us from a backup perspective, and that's usually a precursor to looking at disaster recovery. And then somewhere along that timeline, they may start to see that they've got infrastructure that's aging, and they're trying to really reevaluate, do I really want to go invest in that infrastructure again? Or can I take this opportunity to migrate those workloads to iLand, right? And knowing that the two can interoperate is a big deal because they don't have to forklift everything, right? So I think we see that all the time. And, it just depends on where that entry point is. A lot of folks, one of the reasons we've been so successful in the DR space is because of the platform that people land on is the exact same platform that other customers are using to host business critical production workloads. So it's all there, right? So when they're doing DR tests, they actually have complete visibility, complete control. The billing is very simple and straightforward. So they start to build some familiarity with that platform. And next thing you know, they do an extended DR test and they're doing more application performance testing and things of that nature to validate, the performance of an application, and they get comfortable. So, that's how it usually starts because, again, it doesn't mean that I'm going to just all of a sudden hit the failover button and leave everything in iLand, but we've had customers actually do that. And it's kind of interesting because, it depends on someone's operational maturity, right? The size of their team, is that growing? Is that compressing? We see a lot of folks where it's actually compressing. Again, being challenged to do more with less, but also less headcount. So it just creates more constraints. But I think that, regionally, one thing that's interesting is, one of our customers that's in Florida, typically when you do a DR test, it's not intrusive, right? You want to go and test the applications, make sure they all come up, right? That you can ping through to them and see them. But usually it's not an extended thing where you're going to, literally fail over the environment and work out of the DR site. But some of our customers that are in Florida are so used to natural disaster. That's the way they do DR testing. It's like, all right, Thursday night, we're failing over. We're going to run an iLand for the next 2 weeks. And the whole company runs out of our data center for 2 weeks. And then they fail it back, 2 weeks later. It just shows that, the operational maturity because they're so used to having to do that becomes the new normal for them. Where a lot of folks, if you go back a few years, talk about a DR test, everybody was, no. It's going to take us 90 days to prepare and blah, blah, blah. And we got to get everybody lined up. And, so we've done a lot to build a lot of automation orchestration directly into the platform, but again, control. So, a customer has the ability to go do a test if they want to do a test. They don't have to, pick up the phone and schedule it with iLand or talk to us. If they want to fail over, they can fail over, right? We also can deliver that fully managed, right? So if somebody wants us to be responsible for the testing and for the actual failover, we do that. We call that an Autopilot managed recovery, which is becoming kind of the new trend, because people are, before, if they were either doing this internally or not doing it internally, right? A lot of folks, again, with other priorities, are just trying to offload it. But that's where I saw the market, like I said, over a decade ago. Everything had to be managed, right? So as soon as we started to focus on the platform level and trying to drive more and more levels of automation and orchestration, we wanted to make sure that we could give people the ultimate, choice. Do you have the ability and do you want the ability to hit the magic button, if you will, right? And that's where we were focused for about 8 years. And in the last 2 years, we started to go back to our roots, because we saw a lot of organizations saying, hey, look, this is great, but can you do it for me? Sure.
And do you think that has, now that we're in, 2020 here and all the capabilities that we have nowadays, do you think customers are more apt to not only just per se schedule DR events, but in terms of their, actual real world testing of those and looking to get those periods down? I know, when I was on the client side for many, many years, there was a sense of, okay, we might have, a solid DR plan. We have some technology in place, things work, but it's a major decision, right? It's not just something that you say, oh, we have a problem, or here, power's out. Okay, we're going to fail over. It's a multi-hour, sometimes even multi-day, review, because it's not just IT. It's the business, it's the leadership teams, it's the company as a whole making that decision to do a failover. Do you think with technologies like iLand and what you guys have in place, that's eased that up?
Yeah, I think that, again, it's a big, broad spectrum of people's operational maturity, right? It really depends on who we're working with and what their experience has been. But I will say, you're commenting about the technology. It couldn't be, more direct, because it's amazing how far the technology has come, right? So as an example, software-based replication gives us a lot of control over, really trying to automate the failover process for a specific application, right? We saw a gap in the market, so we started to develop on top of some of these leading replication technologies, and we started to build our own runbook orchestration engine, which would allow us to take various different applications, drag them and drop them into a logical order, and really set the orchestration around recovering groups or the entire environment, right? So that's made it much easier for people to perform both non-intrusive tests as well as actual failovers, right? And then to be able to show people the reporting across the event in real time, is miles away from where we were even 3 years ago, right? So I think the technology is absolutely making it easier, especially from a testing perspective, also from a live event perspective, right? But to your point, it's still a big decision, because the complexity could be, hey, I'm a regional health system, and there's lives on the line, so we need to pull the trigger now. Or I'm a global organization, and I've only got a region that's having problems right now. A lot of the advancements from a networking perspective make it much easier to say, hey, I'm not going to go, put the red hat on and blow the whistle for the entire company to fail over. It's a much higher probability that I've got a problem with an application, that I need to fail that application over and continue operations of that application versus my entire, estate of applications, right? And again, those things were much more difficult to do 3 and 5 years ago, where now it's table stakes.
Right. We had to focus on the technology and all the moving pieces and the dependencies and everything. And nowadays, I feel we're not fully there, but we're almost there, where we're really just looking at the application itself. It's the same thing on the, from the home market. It's, tablets and PCs and desktops and whatever it is. I think nowadays people, they just care about the app. They just want to consume the app. They want to use it. They want to deliver it to their customers, use it for purpose, whatever it is. It all revolves around using that application. Enterprise and data center and infrastructure for for companies, I think is naturally lagged behind that a little bit, just for obvious reasons. But I think we're starting to get to that point where we're able to look at things from that quote unquote consumption based model where, hey, I just want my applications to work, whatever happens, whatever the deal is, regional, politically, whatever the case may be. I need that app to work, and I need it to work, no matter what is going on. How do we make that easy and seamless?
Yep. And if you think about, I joke about this in our house, right? Because I have a 17-year-old son, and if there's a blip on our network, the world is going to end, right?
Yes.
And I'm staring at the new workforce here in the next couple of years, right? So the tolerance for downtime or even poor application performance is gone. It's crazy, right? The demands on an IT organization, right, or the application owners, it's really gotten crazy. So, focusing on that resiliency is a really big deal, and we're seeing more and more people trying to build it directly into the application design process, right? But again, as people are developing these next generation application designs, like our whole platform is built that way, right? It's completely globally distributed. We're using all sorts of cool technologies that you guys probably consult a lot on when you look at distributed databases and data lakes and all other good stuff. But at the end of the day, right, you're building availability into the app. So as the organization continues to grow, and we know that people live in a multi-cloud world, they may be doing next generation cloud native application design, but some of those apps may need to talk to the traditional stuff that they've got in their local data center. Right. So that's another area where we work really well with folks because, again, the networking magic is what makes it all happen. So it's not uncommon to have somebody protecting their VMware-based workloads with us for DR purposes, but at the same time, they also need some of those apps to talk to whatever they've developed in Amazon or Azure. And we can stitch all that together on the network so it's all seamless, which is a big deal, right? It's a requirement these days.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Azure, how are you as a company dealing with other organizations, other, manufacturers who have product? Perfect example, Microsoft Office 365. I think, a lot of us have over the last year have really realized, Office 365, especially from a backup perspective, is not everything that we'd expect it to be. I think if you talk to most people, Microsoft backs everything up for us, and we clearly know that that's not the case. So, what has iLand done to address something specifically like Microsoft Office 365 and working with ultimately other manufacturers' technology, but yet being able to provide solutions to the end customers for them?
Yeah, great question. So that's an area where we've worked really closely with Veeam, and we've developed a cloud-native backup solution for Office 365. We've basically taken Veeam's technology that's designed for an enterprise to back that up to their local environment, but we've developed a cloud service that goes directly from Office 365 to iLand and allows the organization to manage those backups. Because what we find is a lot of people, as we were mentioning earlier, right? I talk to CIOs all the time, and it's pretty common. They're trying to get as many applications out of the data center as they can. So I was speaking with a health insurance CIO a couple months ago, and his comment was very pointed. It said, "Look, if I could move the entire organization to SaaS, I'd do it. It'll never happen in my tenure. It probably won't happen in my predecessor's tenure, right?" So, if we sidestep that for a second, we still have to deal with all the concerns around data protection and everything else, right? So the fact that organizations are adopting, and by the way, now we're talking, it's Microsoft 365, correct? I just saw the emails on this last week. Microsoft changed the naming convention. So now it's Microsoft 365 with the great adoption going on there, is that they moved it out of the data center initially, right? So providing a cloud-based backup that's going directly from Office 365 to us is what we're seeing a lot of demand for. And we've tried to keep it very simple for folks. We're providing, basically unlimited retention, unlimited storage for a flat rate per user. Obviously many organizations may have different, types of policy that they want to put on the retention of that data. So even though we can retain it forever, it's pretty common for someone to say, hey, for legal reasons, we want that retention to be a year or whatever time frame may be. But again, keeping it simple. So it's a simple service, and we provide a real simple pricing. So a lot of people are adopting this right now. Are you guys seeing the same thing?
We are. I think I'd say over the last 4 to 5 years, we've definitely seen that, that technology migration, as you mentioned before, everybody migrating to VMware, everybody starting to, really leverage public cloud, SaaS applications, Office 365, Microsoft 365, is now it's called. Same thing. It was a major technology. Most companies were using it, and, they were trying to adapt to that transition. And I think for the most part, that's been pretty successful. We've done a lot of implementations over the last 4 to 5 years for customers getting, their email, their back office applications into Microsoft's public cloud. But the one thing that's still kind of lingered on has been the backup of that. How do we handle that? How do we do that? And then, as we know, Microsoft's native method, there's definitely some holes in there. So it's been nice to see products like Veeam, iLand leveraging that product now to be able to fill in that gap, and make sure at the end of the day it's seamless for the customer. And it kind of goes back to our overall theme. Customers nowadays, I think even the technology people, the traditional geeks of the world who really love technology, they're even getting to the point. I know myself personally, the same thing. Where yes, the technology is cool and I'm still interested in the bits and bytes, but at the end of the day, I just want the thing to work. I just want my app to work. I want it to be able to do what I need it to do for me.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the adoption is clear, right? We're just going to continue to see, organizations look to, lower the burden internally. And like you said, make sure that they're subscribing to services that work. And you couldn't be more spot on. I mean, so many folks they assume that the SaaS provider is responsible for the data when they're very clearly saying that the customer is responsible for the data. And sure, they'll provide some type of backup, but it's so limited. There's such gaps. And you look at, legal hold and all sorts of other things. There's a lot of things circulating right now just showing how easy it is to compromise some of these services as well. So it doesn't remove the need for traditional backup. So at any rate, we've been extremely pleased with Veeam. We've been working with that technology for the last couple of years, and we've also integrated directly into our platform. So again, hyper focused on trying to drive as much value as we can to the end customer, all via that single interface. But back to the earlier question that Chris had. I mean, we still see that cloud is a big word, a big broad stroke of paint, if you will. And one of the things that we've been, developing for the last couple of years now is we developed a tool we call iLand Catalyst. And this is really a free cloud assessment tool that's designed for anybody that's looking at potentially leveraging an iLand service, whether it be backup as a service, DR as a service, or even migrating production workloads for hosting reasons, right? But this is a real simple, self-contained app that somebody can download, install, give it read-only credentials into Virtual Center, and then they have the ability to build various different models out, by selecting resource pools or VMs for whatever the purpose, right? If they're trying to build a model for backup or for DR or even migration, what the tool will do is it'll actually calculate all the capacity required to deliver that solution. It'll analyze the network so we can understand, one, feasibility, but two, how long is it going to take to push that data for whatever the use case. And then ultimately, if they choose to share the data with us, they can click a button and we get a report. And that'll also do a summary check of all the things you'd expect as far as technical validation on the back end for different versions of the hypervisor and all sorts of other things for compatibility purposes. But the end result is it gives the customer a framework for a solution where we can have a very candid conversation about feasibility. And then if the customer is interested, it also gives us a very good roadmap to be able to provide pricing quickly. So it helps answer the question, is cloud right for my use case? And if so, what's it going to cost me? And this has been a huge, huge help because, again, there's so many options out there. We're really trying to focus on, how can we save everybody time and make sure we help them understand where we can provide value and, frankly, where we can't, right? Nothing worse than wasting someone's time.
And in terms of the future for iLand, is that where you see kind of your business naturally gravitating to, or, is that a focus from your leadership in terms of where you guys want to go, where starting to really, I'll say, offer those services and those tool sets to help customer, not just again for the DR, the co-location, but really looking at, their environment as a whole. And no matter what they want to do, iLand's going to be able to provide a solution for them.
Yeah, and I think the only caveat I'd give you there, Dean, is we want to be very good at doing a few things, right? We absolutely don't want to be everything to everybody. So,
okay.
I think we've got a pretty good line of demarcation today on where we execute. Like as an example, I mean, we play in all major markets except the federal space. That's not really a focus for us. When we get into what we're delivering for the end customer, we're really good at the infrastructure and the hypervisor side of things, right? But we're not providing managed services, let's say at the application level. That's an opportunity for our partners. And that's I think where we're going to continue to focus. So, I think when you look at what's going on with containers, right? That's kind of the next platform. We do a lot of development and use containers for certain things internally, but I think that's going to be the next big, opportunity for us is to help organizations make that transition as well. And again, I see it as a component to an overall strategy, right? So we want to be really good at addressing the use case that we continue to hear from our customers. And, I'll give you an example. I mean, VMware's doing a lot of development around what they're trying to do with containers.
Mm-hmm.
The folks that run our dev team, you could spin up a cube and give them a command line and they'd go, right? I don't think that's the market we're going after, right? Our customers that rely on us are folks that are really looking for us to, take a challenge and solve the problem. So I feel like if we can help them with a more managed approach to containers, I think, we would help a lot of organizations that have, raised their hand and said, hey, what are you doing here? This is what we'd like to see, right? So we'll continue to listen to, folks like yourselves, our partners, as well as our end customers and figure out where we can drive the best value and bring, solutions to market.
And that brings up an interesting point. From your standpoint, from iLand's standpoint, do you see, containerization, looking to go more hand in hand with VMware, since obviously, you're primarily a VMware hypervisor, based platform. Do you see a fork in the road in terms of, containers and Docker and different things being, kind of segmented on its own, or do you think at least for the foreseeable future, you'll be kind of standardized on, hey, VMware at the base and then, whatever comes in on top of that?
Yeah, it's a great question and one that I'm not in a position to really answer right now because, I see two different things, right? I see that we're keeping a very close eye on what VMware is doing, but we've got some really, really sharp development folks, right, that have got a few thoughts as well, right? So we're going to see if we can, adopt some of the things that VMware is bringing out, if it makes sense, or if there's an opportunity for us to differentiate and provide, a solution that might, be a better fit for some of the folks we work with today. We'll see. We're not quite there yet. Not ready to put a flag in the ground.
All right, fair enough.
All right. Well, we're coming up on the end of our time here. I'll give you guys both the opportunity to have a little bit of a soapbox moment. One final word. Dean, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. For me, again, I think it's short and sweet, exactly the message we're trying to portray here. Nowadays, it doesn't have to be the complex multi-month long types of projects to solve these needs, SaaS offerings, DR as a service, co-location, public cloud, all those types of things. Yes, there's obviously still complexities. It has to make sense for your business, but, companies like iLand and why we're a partner with them are just making that easy for people. Easy for us to design, easy for us to, help our customers discuss with them, plan for, build around. But at the end of the day, it's easy for the customer to use. One of the big things, in my own personal evaluation as we were, developing our partnership with iLand and looking at, other options in the market was their control panel and, their integration, API integration, SDK, development kits, but just making that easy for customers to use and to leverage. I think that more than anything else is what makes me as, a customer excited to go out and talk about iLand. It's easy to use.
Yeah, well, Dean, thanks for that. And Chris, I just want to thank both of you for your time and for the partnership. I mean, from our perspective, we're super excited. Love working with you and your teams. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us, again, to chip away and help people, right? I mean, again, cloud doesn't need to be scary. Really encourage people to work with your teams to understand where they're having challenges and have that honesty internally, right? Because that's half the battle. We see a lot of people, trying to figure out like, okay, I want to go from point A to point Z overnight. It doesn't have to, you can be much more pragmatic and get a couple quick wins internally, to help drive, the operational efficiencies that you need to focus on, being more strategic to the business. And that's what we're here to do, to help, right? So again, appreciate the time and the opportunity. And if there's anything we can do to help, please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right. Dean, Dante, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
Take care.